Continue your story about Sinatra.
My wife and I were getting dressed. I was putting on my tuxedo at the Washington Hilton Hotel about an hour and a half before the show. The phone rang, and there was a member of the committee for the big gala, and they said, "Art, would it be possible? Could you, um, would you do the first hour instead of Frank Sinatra?" You're kidding. Well, what happened to Frank? He says he got into an argument with the stage director and he's walked off the show. I said, "You mean he stiffed the President of the United States and the gala because he got into an argument with a local director?" He says, "You know Frank, and you know he's short fused, and I did. I've seen Frank do some rather interesting things." He's gone. He says, "I know it's asking a lot, but could you do it?" I said, "Well, it's a variety show, isn't it? I'm introducing people." He says, "Yeah." I said, "I've been getting ready for this for 40 years. Of course, I'll be down. We'll do it. Just have the names and give me some information." And I did. So now the intermission comes along, and Bob Hope shows up because he knows the time. He's not coming to the show. He came into my dressing room. He says, "Art, you did the first show." And I said, "Yeah." He says, "What jokes did you tell?" That's the first question any comic will ask any other comic or comedian who preceded him on anything that he hasn't heard. You know that. We've all been on telethons where we've appeared and somebody else has gone, you tell your favorite joke and nothing. The guy told it. So I said, "Well, Bob, I don't tell any jokes that you tell." He says, "But you tell things about people doing funny things." He says, "Would you please," now he's showing you what a pro this guy is, "would you do me a favor and come down to my dressing room and go over my cue cards?" I said, "Certainly." I went down. We went over about 175 cue cards, all written down. And there was only one. I asked a kid about something, and he wanted to be an admiral, and so forth. And he says, "Oh," out goes the joke about the Navy, just in general, not kids or not the admiral. And I had a great deal of respect for Bob to show not only its experience and knowledge that this can happen to you, but the willingness to ask another performer to go out of his way to come down and do that job. Isn't that
That's
interesting?
Great. That is great. Yeah, well, those kind of pros are just marvelous, and that you've had the fortune to have had chance to work with them is great. Back to the people are funny thing. What, in all those years, what would you say was one of the most outrageous stunt that you did?
Some of the people are funny stunts, and by the way, our big competitor always, a dear friend, Ralph Edwards, Truth or Consequences. Both shows appeared at about the same time. Both shows were on NBC, and both shows were stunts, plain and simple stunts, never been done before. His were done on the premise, if you don't know the truth, you pay the consequences. Ours was just plain old, people are funny, step up to the microphone, and so. The stunts were elaborate, expensive, and sometimes planned months and months before it happened. For instance, we had a stunt once where one of the writers said, they're going to take out a whole street of houses over here in this kind of old district, and in the next year or two, because I read in the paper that a new street's going to come through there. And these houses are going to be destroyed. So we found out that we could buy one of them, cheap, fairly cheap. It was going to be destroyed. It was empty. We then perked it up, put some furniture and stuff in it, and we ran a contest. No, the next thing we did, we opened a real estate agency office, and we found a couple to rent the house to through the fake front. And the one we picked out of the numbers, because we rented it very cheaply, was a woman who worked as a clerk at the Broadway Hollywood on the corner of Broadway, Vine Street, and Hollywood Boulevard. And through my friends at the Hollywood store, Ed Carter, who ran the store, we ran a fake contest, and she won a prize of a weekend trip in San Francisco. So they went on the weekend to San Francisco. While they were gone, we had house movers come in and move the entire house. And by the way, something happened that surprised us. She had a black cat that she left behind. So unknown to us, she asked a neighbor lady to sit in with the cat. And at 5 o'clock in the morning, when they started to move the house, we heard a yowl from the lady wilder than the cat. We got rid of her, of course. Not physically, but we got her out of the picture. Now they came back from San Francisco, and they're met at the airport by a limousine and say the additional prize is to see Art Linkletter's People Are Funny. Oh, okay, so they come by our theater on Vine Street. We had a theater, Art Linkletter Theater then. So I come out in the audience, I say, people are funny about traveling and going away on trips. You no sooner get away from a house, you get in a plane or you get in wherever you are and you start thinking, gee, did I lock all the doors? Did I turn out all the lights? Has the gas light been turned out? We have a list of 25 things here that you should really do. And I'm just going to see, is there anybody in the theater who has been away on a trip or who's on a trip right now even? And their hand went up. I knew where they were sitting. I said, well, have that couple right there. Would you come up, please? What's your name? What do you do? Where do you live? Out here. All right, I said, here's the list of things. We're going to take you out there, and we're going to give you $1,000 for every one of these things that you haven't done. Now they come out there, and we have the cameras waiting. They get out of the cab, and they look. There's no house. They look around the neighborhood. Yeah, it's the neighborhood. They come up closer to be sure there's no house. They're not going to believe their eyes. There's no house, but they walk up to see if it's somehow sunk down. Now they begin to see people are funny. They begin to realize it. And of course, we whisk them back to the show. And we say, how does it feel to find your house missing? And we got a little laughter out of that stuff. And I say, now, this is the real crux of the thing. That house has been taken, and we've hidden it somewhere. And if you can find it, we're going to give you a year's rent on a new house in San Fernando Valley, a car, mink coat, but you got to find the house. And they said, well, how do you find a house? I said, well, I'll give you a hint. Call the police department, Bureau of Missing Houses. Then during the next 5 weeks, we had them out with bloodhounds. We had them out with detectives. We flew them over the town in helicopters. And on the last day, last week, we had a circus tent, big circus tent erected on a vacant lot next to the theater right there. It happened to be a vacant lot. And we had Madame Lazanga, fortune teller, big signs. So now they come in, they haven't found the house, and I say, did you notice on the way in any changes in the neighborhood? And they said, well, some kind of a carnival going on next door. I said, that's what we're going to do. Madame Lazanga, the fortune teller, will tell you where your house is if you can convince her. So they went next door. We have cameras in there because in the tent is their house. Now there is a classic example of a complete double, triple, quadruple, double cross.
Extraordinary.
Being surprised all the way through. And we did other things like that, trips around the world looking for a mysterious man with a black box and other things. But that was the most elaborate and the most successful.
Brilliant.
Isn't that something?
Absolutely brilliant.
As a writer yourself, you can see all
Oh,
the
boy.
possibilities. So we made people funny. They weren't necessarily funny. House Party found people to be funny.
House Party in '61, People Are Funny went off the air. House Party was still going strong.
Yeah, about 70.
Yeah. Why was Funny canceled?
Funny just kind of ran out of gas. We had done everything we thought of, and I forget what it was, but the ratings weren't as good as they used to be. Any show, if it stays on long enough, is going to start being ho-hum to some people.
That's right.
And I was getting older, and some of the young kids might not have liked me as much as their parents did. I don't know. But these shows, I was amazed last night when Seinfeld says that this is the 9th year of Seinfeld and it's still #1. I don't think of any big comedy show that doesn't start to cave after 5 or 6 or 7 years. Golden Girls. How long did Mary and Bob show? Yeah, Dick.
Dick, it was just 5 years, but
5
they
years.
went off voluntarily.
Yeah. But the truth of the matter is, if you have a comedy show, all your characters who are hyped and tend to be caricatures in some way, every one of their shticks and their reactions are known. You can't do anything. You can't say, oh, watch Mary now, or watch B. Arthur, and you'll see what she's going to say. Isn't that true?
Yeah. Seinfeld is a different. Seinfeld is odd because the first 2 or 3 years it was a flop.
Yes.
It only got successful when people started to discover it.
And it doesn't have any storyline.
No.
As a matter, as he says, it does nothing.
Yeah.
They have the shortest scenes I've ever seen in any musical, any comedy. Sometimes it's 2 lines, then you and they're at the restaurant.
Yeah.
But they do things. I must say, a great change in my time and this time is what you can talk about and what you can say. Television has become so sophisticated and so able to handle. Last night, DeGeneres said, this is a great moment for me, and I hope all the kids listening in will see that you can live your own life no matter what you are. And that's really what it is. And a lot of it's in your face comedy, like Rosie O'Donnell, right in your face. And it's different. It's not soft. You can do a whole show on Seinfeld about masturbation, orgasms, trying to buy a condom. My God, in my day, well, to show you how far it's come, in 1933, when I was an announcer, if you used the word pregnant, you were cut off the air. Now they show you how it happens.
On the Van Dyke Show in 1963, 64, we couldn't use the word pregnant.
No, and everybody in a bedroom had to have his feet on the floor, all those kind of things. But times change, and I think that I refuse to be pessimistic. I think radio and TV, by the number of venues, by the kinds of things that you know ahead of time that your children shouldn't look at, will take care of it.
I think so.
I don't want censorship. No censorship.
You're so right, sir.
And that's a Baptist preacher's son talking.
Yeah, I know, but it's right. Well, you're a smart and good man. There's a lot of other television work you did, you were the MC of a very, very great event in American culture in 1955.
I was?
Yes, you were.
What was that?
You were the MC of the opening of Disneyland.
Oh, yes, the opening of Disneyland.
That's right.
You want to hear the story?
Yes, please.
Fascinating story.
Yeah.
Walt and I were old friends. Our families were friends. My son Jack was going with his daughter, and we were, as fathers, were saying, well, won't that be nice? And nothing happened, but Walt and I had traveled in Europe. We had done the entertainment at the Winter Olympics at Squaw Valley, and we brought up stars, and I emceed the shows. Very funny. And when it first happened, all the tables were different nationalities because the athletes clung together, the Russians and the French and the Germans and so forth, and they had interpreters. And you'd get up to tell a joke, and they'd all laugh at a different time because that languages had different lengths. You'd tell a joke, the French, the Germans, the Swedish, and finally the English, of course. But he asked me if I would be MC. It was live, 2 hours. No tape in those days, no rehearsal, jumping all over the fairgrounds and doing the thing. And he knew I was good at that. And so he wanted me to do it. And then he said, Art, we have a difficult moment here. He says, we're good friends. And he says, and I've got to negotiate with you a price. Why don't you have an agent like every other normal star in Hollywood? And I said, because I like to do my own deals. Well, he said, I'm not playing poor boy, but you know, because you've been with me, we've had cost overruns, we've had strikes, we've had problems financing. I've had to mortgage part of the studio. I said, it's a sad story, but don't tell me anymore because you don't need any of those arguments with me. I'll do it for scale. He says, you'll do it for scale. I said, certainly. And in return, I expect you to do something for me. I said, I'm a partner in one of the largest photo development companies in L.A., Royalton, and I would like to have the concession for all the film and all the cameras sold at Disneyland for the next 10 years. He says, you got it. So I got the highest fee anybody ever got for appearing on any show, even Oprah.
Would you be my agent?
But anyhow, isn't that funny? We went out there, and it was a mess. It was a hot day. The freshly laid asphalt was sticking to the ladies' high heels. Some of the things weren't working right. In fact, the show, many people forget, Disneyland, now one of the greatest hits in the history of entertainment, got bad reviews from almost everybody. The crowds got, the things weren't quite ready. I've seen this in the opening of 3 World's Fairs. See, so there is where my experience, San Diego, Dallas, and San Francisco, where all the fairs always open unready. They never get ready. And so I was ready for lights to go out. One time I ran to a place in the western town, and I was supposed to have a microphone lying there, and the camera was there, and somebody put a microphone under a pile of lumber, and we couldn't find it. And I know they were on page 45, and I was supposed to go to be on page 46. We better find this microphone before it came time. We did. And all these kind of things happened. And then years later, I flew down to Florida with Walt and went up in the governor's balloon while secrecy, and we looked for the place where there was going to be Disney. So it was, I knew him until he died. And we were dear friends, Lois and his wife, Lil, were good friends. And it was a great experience to see this man work.
What influence do you think he had on television?
Great influence. In the first place, he clung to the business of family, Disney and its Family Hour. Remember on ABC every Sunday, and he appeared. I see that Eisner's going to do it again this coming fall. And he was always talking about family, the American family. When he and I would be walking around in Tivoli Gardens in Denmark, he'd have his notebook out. He'd be writing down. I said, what are you writing down now, Walt? He says, look at all the lights, every one. Every night they put the lights in. No lights are allowed to go out. He said, look at all the benches they have. They have places for people to sit. Look at all the different kinds of restaurants placed in this kind of ways. And I said, well, what do you care about that? And he said, someday I'm going to have a big show for the American family, and it's going to be comfortable. It's going to have wonderful people working there. And he was thinking that far ahead, that far ahead. And so I saw all those things to him, and he was a great family guy, but he kept smoking. And I used to tell him, don't smoke, Walt.
That's what killed him, huh?
Cancer, just like Edward R. Murrow. And, of course, many, many others. But those were experiences that gave me an insight. One time I was doing a show for the Community Chest in Beverly Hills. We used the theater there on the corner of Rodeo Drive and Beverly. Now it's a bank. And 3,000-seat theater. And Jack Benny and Burns and Allen and a number of stars were there, and I'm emceeing it. So we look out through the curtain, and there's a 3,000-seat theater, and there are only 20 people in it. 25, front row. I said, my God, what are we going to do? And Jack says, they came, we'll do the show. Oh, I said, all right, I guess we will. Right. So I went out and I did a very brief introduction. Didn't do much. I introduced Benny, did his whole act. Wow. That was a lesson to me. Whoever comes is entitled to your best. Small or big, give them your best. They're there. I must add, the reason why there were nobody there was that the head of the United Way hadn't mailed out the invitations. They were found in boxes in the basement, all addressed, all stamped, and they hadn't gone out. But when you, all the experiences I've had.
Oh, I'll bet. In 1955, you mentioned Ed Murrow. And there was a show that was in some way similar to a show that he did.
Person to Person?
Yeah. Your show was called Inside Beverly Hills.
Inside Beverly Hills.
What was that? That was
a show, that was a special that John Goodell and I put together.
Mm-hmm.
Had the highest rating of any special for over 10 years.
And what
all shows.
All
shows. We had a portable outfit. In those days there weren't many. You know, it was new to take out stuff. We'd go into the homes of stars, almost like the lifestyles of the rich and famous. We opened the show, I remember, with me riding in Beverly Hills up a beautiful tree-lined avenue, and I'm standing on the fender, the running board of the garbage truck, in white tie and tails. Opened the show that way. We're picking up garbage and visiting our friends.
That's great.
We did Durante. We did a lot of stars. And so Edward R. Murrow's show was much more just right in the home. He didn't move around. We didn't have enough brains to think we should do this every month.
This was just the one time.
We just did it once.
Uh-huh.
And then I did Edward R. Murrow's Person to Person. I was on the show with him, came into my home, and he did the thing, and I got to know him a little bit.
Yeah, great interviewer.
Yes, he was a very thoughtful guy, smoking. That was in the days when we tried something brand new technically. We had a microphone that you didn't have wired to anything. Can you imagine that?
Oh,
Today it's nothing. But these little things that you take for granted today, that was a big thing. We could go and walk from room to room. He told me that Tallulah Bankhead, when he interviewed her, had a wired microphone in her, and she had to go to the bathroom. When she went in there, she says, "All right, you so-and-so," she says, "turn this thing off."
Oh, that's interesting. That was on that show. And you also, in other television stuff you did, you were, I think you mentioned it earlier, you were in 4 General Electric theater productions as an
Yes,
actor.
I did a number of theater shows. Sometimes when I'm lecturing and people ask me on the stage after I have questions and answers from the stage, they say, "Do you know the Reagans?" I say, "Do I know the Reagans? Nancy was my wife at one time." And I let that sink in. And then I say it was only a half hour on the GE Theater show on CBS. We did a show called The Oddball, where her son was an oddball and my daughter was a romantic girl, and we were trying to keep them from seeing each other. So I knew Nancy then. And of course, later on, coming back to get the cavalcade, to the Disneyland, Walt said, "Get a couple of your buddies who'll work with you." And I got Ronnie Reagan and Bob Cummings. So the 4 of us did it. Disney, Reagan, Cummings, who was a cute, funny guy, and me.
Yeah.
So I've known him for 40, 50, 55 years. And the last time I saw him, I was giving him a medal. I was president of the International Swimming Hall of Fame at Fort Lauderdale. I'd been a swimmer. And he was getting a medal, and we went to his office up in Fox, in Century City, and we hung the medal on him. And he says, "Art," he says, "don't you live somewhere near me in Bel Air?" I said, "Yeah, Ron, I live about $875,000 above you." He laughed. He loved to laugh at himself. He loved to laugh at jokes. He was a marvelous guy. Is,
Yeah.
but unfortunately doesn't know many people anymore.
Yeah, that is sad. And in '62, you were on the Tonight Show a lot.
Yes, in fact, I emceed part of the Tonight Show between the great, the switch from Jack Parr to Johnny Carson.
Mm-hmm.
They were filling in, and I filled in for a week and did the Tonight Show just for fun. While I was doing all these other shows.
Would you have ever been interested in hosting?
No,
that
no,
thing?
no, no.
Yeah.
No, I didn't want to do the Tonight Show. I just did it as a challenge, and it was fun to be on. I'd been on it a number of times with Jack Parr and Steve Allen, who was an old buddy of mine and probably one of the brightest guys in Hollywood.
My first boss in Hollywood.
Steve Allen. He's a Renaissance man.
He sure is. Sure is. He's great. He was my first boss. Got my first television job with Steve.
When he first started spreading out from being a disc jockey at KNX, he used to come and sit in the audience and watch me work on a house party in radio. He knew I knew something, and he was watching to do some of the things. Another time, the head of J. Walter Thompson, Danny Danker, came over to me and he says, Art, do you mind if I bring Jim Mason over and watch you work? I said, well, sure. What does he want to come over and watch me work for? He says, we're asking him to be the master of ceremonies of the Hollywood Lux Theater in Hollywood, a big hour show, because they threw Cecil B. DeMille off because he wouldn't pay his dues to the union. And he wouldn't pay his dues to the union because the union was using dues to support political campaigns that he didn't believe in. So Mason was going to be on. I said, well, what's that got to do with me? He says, when we asked him to be the guest MC on the Hollywood Lux Theater, he said, well, what is my motivation? And you say, what do you mean motivation? He says, well, who am I? He says, you're the host of the show. He says, yeah, but what is my character? He says, just genial or what? And this is an interesting thing. A lot of actors don't know who they are in public unless they are acting as a villain or a hero or whatever. So he says, well, my gosh, you don't know who you are. He says, I haven't the faintest idea. He says, we'll go over and you'll be Art Linkletter. I like him. He's a genial. He's friendly. And so he came over and watched me. And of course, I watched him or heard him, and I couldn't tell any difference because I don't have any sticks.
Yeah.
But he, in his mind, was doing me. That's what an actor does. Fascinating, isn't it?
Yes, that is. That's great.
I haven't thought of that story in years.
Well, I'm glad you did.
Well, I only have about 10,000 more, so we better hurry.
In '63, you had a show called the Art Linkletter Show, which was kind of like a variation of Candid Camera, something like that.
Yeah.
Describe that.
Well, it didn't go very far.
Oh.
It was one of the numbers of shows we haven't mentioned that didn't last.
Do you remember?
They all don't work, even if you're doing the stuff you know how to do best.
Exactly.
They're at the wrong time, or they get the wrong something.
Who were some of the actors in that? Do you remember any of them?
I don't even remember any of them. You kind of shut those things out.
Yeah, I understand.
That's why you go on.
Okay, then you went on to Art Linkletter's Hollywood Talent Scouts.
Yes. Arthur Godfrey had been doing it in the East for several years.
Right.
And then it went off, and now they're going to bring it back. So I come on to do Hollywood Talent Scouts, which meant it was a very interesting show because you had big stars who were supposed to bring on young professional talent that hadn't made it.
We'll pick up from there after he changes the Schwartz on the thing.